It's OPB Politics Now for Friday, November 10th. Central Oregon has watched its groundwater levels decline steadily for years, thanks to climate change and a development boom. These concerns are putting roadblocks in front of a developer who wants to build a luxury resort outside of Redmond. The Thornburg Resort has faced opposition from environmentalists and nearby landowners for years, but now a sovereign nation is getting involved. This week, the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals heard an appeal filed by the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, who argued that by approving this development, Deschutes County commissioners violated treaty rights. This week on the podcast, we're digging into this fight and how it could impact the way local governments engage with tribes on planning projects. I'm your host, OPB Politics reporter Alex Zielinski.
And I'm Emily Cureton Cook, OPB's Central Oregon Bureau Chief.
Emily, thanks for joining me today. So before diving into the latest on this conflict, can you give us a little background on the groundwater problems in Central Oregon and how they're impacting local residents?
Yeah, so for a couple of years now, my reporting has focused a lot on water issues in the Deschutes River Basin. This is a water system that depends on rain and snow falling in the Cascade Mountains. And that rain and snow can take decades or even longer in some cases to seep underground and reach aquifers that are further from the mountains. And those aquifers are really important for some of the fastest growing places in the state, like Redmond and Bend. And they're also facing a lot of demand for housing and development because of that growth. So scientists who studied the Deschutes Basin have told me the pumping for that growth isn't necessarily what's causing the groundwater declines. The majority of the water level dropping that we're seeing is fueled actually by drought and climate change. But pumping for development does play a smaller role. And it's certainly on the minds of people who are the first to pay the price for these changes. Those are largely rural homeowners. Over the last few years, Deschutes County has seen a record number of reports of failing wells, and that can leave people living outside of city services without running water at their homes.
Right. So that brings us to this planned luxury resort called the Thornburg. How long has that development been in the mix? I know you've been covering it for a minute. And can you kind of describe what developers envision for it?
Yeah, Thornburg, I mean, that the word itself has almost become like just a flashpoint in Central Oregon. It's been on the radar for more than 2 decades now. You'll see yard signs protesting it sometimes. The developer's latest plans include nearly 1,000 luxury homes, a man-made lake, and a golf course, among other amenities, for a community that's being marketed as a high-end destination resort. The site itself is about 2,000 acres near Redmond, and its plans have faced lawsuits and appeals and protests pretty much since the project started. Several sources I've talked to about this have claimed it as one of the most, if not the most, litigated land use development in Oregon history. A lot of those lawsuits have taken issue with environmental impacts, and especially how much water it takes to turn the high desert green. And this water would have to come from groundwater pumping.
Right. And so the appeals that's headed to the appeals court this week, that came after a decision made by the county, Deschutes County. So what role did the county commissioners play in allowing this development to move forward? And how are they kind of involved in this debate?
Yeah, this can get really wonky, but at the end of the road, the county has authority to approve plans for land use like destination resorts. So it's been involved in various ways with Thornburg for decades. And in the latest turn of the screw, so to speak, it was up to the county to approve changes to Thornburg's plan for offsetting its impacts on fish and wildlife, which is a state requirement. Earlier this year, a majority of the county commissioners in Deschutes County gave that plan the green light. And their approval was controversial at the time because it overrode some objections from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and from the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs.
Right. And so that's the tribe that's appealing this decision, saying it impacts their treaty rights. Can you explain their argument a little bit?
Well, it's really important to understand that Warm Springs tribal members have fishing and hunting and gathering rights that extend far beyond their reservation's boundaries, as they have always done those things. Their reservation is about 50 miles from this resort site. But respect for their rights off reservation are guaranteed by an 1855 treaty with the federal government. And Warm Springs CEO Bobby Bruno says his tribal council is very concerned with how more growth in Central Oregon could take a toll. He says part of the problem is local officials that make land use decisions on the tribe's ancestral lands often don't consult with the tribes at all.
And at times I think perhaps Warm Springs knows more about everything else going on, but everybody else doesn't know about Warm Springs.
Bruno really stressed to me that the tribes aren't out to oppose all developments, but their leaders do want to protect Warm Springs' interest.
Meaning the water, the fisheries, the animals, the vegetation, and the big thing hanging over everybody's head that we all have to deal with now is climate change.
He says this breakdown over Thornburg happened after the county didn't notify the tribe or the tribal government of important changes to that resort's fish and wildlife plan when it did notify other governments, state and federal agencies. And as I've said, this resort site, while it's far from the reservation, it is well within the tribe's ancestral or what they call ceded lands. That's about 10 million acres that the United States gained when the Warm Springs tribe signed this treaty that promised their rights would be respected to fish across the broader area, which is now North and Central Oregon.
Right. So that seems like a pretty big oversight. Based on the experts you've talked to about this, does it feel like the tribe's argument has solid legal standing?
It is an open question how this state land use board of appeals will think about treaty rights in terms of local planning efforts and obligations. I reached out to a spokesperson for Oregon Governor Tina Kotek, who told me in an email this week that the state is obligated to have meaningful consultation with tribes before making any land use decisions that would affect tribal members, and that the state works with tribes through government-to-government relations to support and implement treaty rights established by the federal government. And Warm Springs leaders, just a little bit of a counterpoint to that idea that treaty rights were established by the federal government. I talked to Warm Springs leaders by that, and they said it's really important to understand that no one established their treaty rights. They have hunted and fished and foraged forever in what is now Oregon. So they will tell you that these rights were simply reserved when the U.S. gained a bunch of land in that 1855 treaty. I talked to an Indian law expert about all of this and how the local, state, and federal and tribal powers interact. Robert Miller from Arizona State University is a citizen of the Eastern Shawnee Tribe of Oklahoma and a distinguished law professor. He told me many U.S. Supreme Court cases have upheld off-reservation rights like this.
The Constitution, Article 6, says that this Constitution and the laws enacted thereunder and any treaties enacted are the supreme law of the land. No one, state, county, you or me, can violate tribal treaty rights because it is Article 6, the supremacy clause of the United States.
I mean, all the same, Warm Springs leaders told me that Oregon does have a history of violations. Just to, kind of skim the surface, they said an obvious example to them was the construction of hydroelectric dams on the Columbia River that happened without tribal consultation, and it decimated treaty-protected fish populations.
How have county commissioners and the Thornburg developer, how are they responding to the tribe's pushback on the resort? What are they saying?
Well, the resort's developer disputes this entire premise. He says the project wouldn't affect streams or rivers much at all, and that local entities like Deschutes County are not required to give special notice or consultation to tribes. The developer, his name is Cameron DeLashma, he's told me quite a few times now that actually his project will be a model for water conservation. And he said that because the resort has to mitigate its impacts to get the land and water use approvals at once, it's actually going to be a net benefit to fish and wildlife in the broader Deschutes Basin. And the Warm Springs tribes didn't outright reject that premise. They wanted more time, just to be clear. And the county said, no, this is already so far along, we're going to approve this anyway. And at this point, the county has largely tried to wash its hands of that decision and this conflict. Officials didn't go to the hearing this week. Warm Springs tribes were there, and facing them instead of the county was DeLashma's attorneys who are intervening and answering in the legal fight. I did speak with Deschutes County Commissioner Tony DeBone about all this. He was among the board majority that voted to ignore tribal objections to Thornburg. And DeBone just says it's too late for the tribes to jump in now. He says the opposition to this resort has already such a long history with so much litigation and lawsuits by other neighbors.
People that are very motivated about climate change and bad things happening and don't want the next person to move to Central Oregon, they want it to stop, and they're looking for any reason for it to stop.
He says the resort developer DeLash Schmidt offered a reasonable plan for mitigating environmental impacts, and it checked all the boxes and followed state laws.
So this has brought up a lot of interesting kind of perspectives on how local government can engage maybe better or more effectively with tribal government. I'm curious kind of what you've learned from this, kind of how it's influenced the way they're thinking, local leaders are thinking about engaging with tribes in the future.
We're already seeing this fight reverberate. Leaders in Bend and Deschutes County are promising a sea change in a lot of ways. They're promising to consult with tribes on future developments. So at the tribe's request, Deschutes County has started notifying Warm Springs of certain land use applications, such as destination resorts or projects that could turn farmland into residential subdivisions. And that's as leaders from the city of Bend are also promising a different approach. This month, we saw was actually a pretty historic moment. City councilors met with the Warm Springs Tribal Council for the very first time. It was pretty short. It was like a 22-minute meeting, but it ended with some pretty meaty promises from the city council that they are making a firm commitment to seek out tribal input as the city keeps growing.
Yeah, it seems really wild to me that this hasn't been status quo for a long time, especially knowing how close these two communities engage and interact with each other. So the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals heard the tribe's appeal this week. When should we expect a ruling?
The state land board decision could come in December. It's hard to interpret the state land board's rules. That is like a special skill. It's 77 days, I think, after the oral arguments. But the attorneys for Warm Springs told me they expect a ruling in mid-December.
Well, that's not too far away. Just to look back a little bit more, Central Oregon is an extremely popular place for people to either vacation or visit, not just in Oregon, but from across the country. And there are a number of resorts that have already been there for a long time, like Sun River and Black Butte Ranch. Is there a history of those developments causing kind of similar alarm, or is this kind of a new era of addressing developers' impact on both groundwater use and also, tribal neighbors?
I think on those 2 points, when I talked with Warm Springs CEO Bobby Bruno, he said the tribal council is paying very close attention and is looking at groundwater and how it could affect connected streams that fish need in a particularly kind of scrutinizing way. Now, he also was like, we have worked with developers a lot and other governments a lot on other things. You just don't hear about those because they don't blow up. And a lot of the time when the tribes come to a developer and want to work out a compromise, which is what they're saying happened first in this case, those conversations are productive. They weren't in the case of Thornburg, which sets it apart, on the one hand. And then another reason that I have followed this one development pretty closely is that I think it does signify something of a new era when it comes to water and conflicts over who gets to use water and for what purpose. Probably Thornburg's biggest battle is over its quest to get state water rights to build these luxury homes, which probably be second homes for a lot of people, and a golf course. And, those legal fights over their access to water rights are ongoing. It's quite a list that I keep trying to stay on top of all of them. And I think they signify a changing of the tide for Oregon's water regulation in that, in recent years, there have been roadblocks and no's to this developer when in the past he had gotten yeses. So Thornburg is definitely caught in the middle of a changing approach for how Oregon looks at water use. And it's going to be really interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, we'll certainly be following your reporting and kind of the next steps here. But let's leave this conversation here for now. Emily, thank you for joining us this week.
It was so much fun, Alex. Let's do it again.
We will. This episode of OPB Politics Now was produced by Andrew Thien. Our audio engineer is Nalene Silva, and our music comes from Audio Network. We'll be back next week with more political news from across the Pacific Northwest. Until then, you can find all of OPB's reporting at opb.org. While you're there, why not click the big red Contribute Now button and become an OPB member? You can also rate and review us in your podcast app of choice. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.